image trace and live paint bucket. So one of probably the coolest additions to Illustrator a few versions back was the image trace. So image trace traces a bitmap image and converts it to a vector graphic. Let's do this. So file and place, and I'm going to select, let's select the coffee. Click place. You can see I could do this with a sketch as well, or I could do this with, a full portrait. Now there are some limitations here, but what this does is it's going to convert this bitmap into a vector graphic. So at this point, do I embed it? Should I embed it? Should I make this be part of my Illustrator file? I probably don't need to, because once I have traced it and converted it to vector, I really don't need to have that file weight, the weight of having a photo in my Illustrator document. So I'm choosing not to embed it at this point. So when I do place alongside embed, here I get edit original, right? That will launch my editor for the specific file type. And I have an image trace, okay? So let's go ahead, and I have a little arrow here. I have tracing presets. So if I do an image trace, by default, it goes to the first in the list of default presets. And that happens to be very, very minimal detail. So I can click one of these presets. Say I want to have 16 colors. Okay, it takes a little while, so you have to be patient with this. Let's zoom in to see what's happening here a bit. So like I said, you have to be patient sometimes, but can you see, remember, vector is always object. So what it's doing is it's taking the colors in the picture and making them be their own object. And in this case, I said 16 color. Let's do 3 color, and you'll see a very limited, simple. Sometimes that's just the look that we're looking to get. I mean, that's maybe what we want it to look like. Now I can do a high fidelity, and this now in tests that we have done, when you do high fidelity, sometimes your Illustrator file becomes a larger file than the old JPEG or TIFF was, because there's so much there. So if you just kind of see, there are tons of different colors, and every single color now is its own object in Illustrator. This can be crazy for editing. So I'm going to go back down to a small range because I like this simplified look here. I can go into my little box here. That was that image trace panel that I saw before, and this allows me to change some settings. So I can have one of the presets here, or my different modes. I can make this be grayscale, whatever color mode I want. The number of colors, I have a slider here so I can change it. And then of course you can go into advanced and see all kinds of advanced features dealing with how we're tracing and converting this picture of pixels into vector. Okay, so I have a lot of different items here. The high color, let's look and see. I'm again going to get more high color. So there's a lot of things here to play with. I'm going to go back and stick with auto, and let's limit the color down a smidge. Okay, I'm going to actually, and I can type in here too, let's just go with 10 colors, because that will probably give us the simplest view. So once this is done, I can close it, because I can always go back up here to the top and open it again. I'm going to choose expand. So the expand button basically allows me to now go and edit. Okay, so it's kind of like, okay, I'm done messing around with my settings. I'm ready to move on and for surely put this into Illustrator for us to edit. And this is what it looks like. Okay, so I'm gonna go to my selection tool here, use my space bar to reposition things a bit. So it's grouped when I first start. Deselect, select, it's grouped. So very first thing that I do is go under the object and ungroup it. And you might have to do a couple levels of ungrouping because it could be embedded, a group within a group within a group, so to speak. So I go outside to deselect, and then I click in here again. Now what always happens is that when you bring a picture in, you end up with this white. So I have a white, and if I were to bring this to the front, arrange and bring to front, you're going to see that it's this white piece here. I'm going to go ahead and delete that, unless you like to have kind of a mask or silhouette there. So then when I look, you can see all of my different shapes. that are created. So I could change my coffee cup if I wanted to. Let's just go into my color and slider. Say I wanted to have a little bit more of a reddish tint. But look at, there's still some color here and some color here, but very easy to start converting things. So anyway, that's how we can do our live trace. All right, I'm going to move on to the side here and show you some other tools that we have. I'm going to use some boxes just for simplicity's sake. Actually, let's do some circles in here as well. So we have another tool. We have a couple more tools that we want to talk about. Let's recolor these. Okay. So over here under in my tools, if I look in sort of that third section, there's a grouping of 3 tools: the shape tool, the shape builder tool, the live paint bucket, and the live paint selection tool. So the shape builder tool, this is a really fun tool. It's not mentioned in this week's lesson, but I just have to show you. So what this does is, if I have some selected pieces here, the shape builder tool, notice that I just did a marquee selection. I took the selection tool and just did a drag over top of my objects. And going back to my shape builder tool, when things are selected, if I drag over areas, you can see how it's kind of highlighting or sectioning out. So this tool allows me to select and drag and merge shapes together. So let me deselect and just show you what I did. Isn't that cool? So I can, build things sort of like Legos or building blocks. Say I wanted this to be just like this, okay? And I select everything again, go to my shape builder, and everywhere that I click and drag, I now bring these together into one shape. So that's a fun tool, especially to build some complicated shapes really quickly and easily. Below it, we've got something even more cool, I think, the live paint bucket tool. So the live paint bucket tool allows us to color and create things that now we don't have the restriction of having to having complete objects that are closed, and the deal of trying to make sure that it's a little bit more flexible, I guess, trying to make sure that we don't have all straight objects. So let me just draw here a second. I'm gonna create some we'll go like this so you can see how this is working. So right now I have this shape of a zigzag sort of pattern and then 2 straight lines. So if I were to select all of those, at this point I don't have any closed shapes, right? No closed shapes. Actually, I want to bring these 2, I'm going to right click on those 2 lines and bring them to the front because I want them to intersect. So I don't have objects here, I just have a bunch of lines. Typically this is how we draw in Illustrator. We end up drawing lines, then realize, oh, I don't have any complete objects or closed shapes, and it's really difficult to color. So by selecting all of these lines, I'm going to go to my live paint bucket tool, and you can see that my icon looks like a paint bucket, and there are 3 color squares on top. What those color squares are actually they're coming from my swatches. So let's just bring that out, extend it so you can see. Oops, nope, sorry. Okay, so look at where I'm at. I have my white as my fill color. White is the middle color. I'm going to use my arrow keys, and look what happens. Watch both my icon and watch my swatches panel. So I'm navigating with my arrow keys, and I'm going through my swatches panel, and it's changing my icon. It's telling me what color am I going to paint with, okay? And I actually did an up and down arrow. You can see I can jump. Okay, so let's say we get into this greens, and I click in this region. Look at that, and I'm going to use my arrow key to navigate to the next swatch, and click. Click to the next swatch, and click. So what I now have created, how cool is that? And the reason why I wanted to tell you why it's filling this, because there's actually not a line there, it's because it thinks that this is a closed shape. So it's a little bit of a trick that we're doing. But you can now color areas or regions that are not closed using this Live Paint Bucket tool. It is super, super cool. These areas here now are called regions, and if I use my Live Paint selection tool, it's a selection tool just for that, you can see that I'm getting the attributes for just that section. So let's go ahead and put a stroke maybe on this, and I could you know, color, let's do an interesting stroke so you can see. So I can play around with this. I can really choose to edit things on the fly, so to speak. All right, so if I wanted to add some more features, let's say I wanted to make a circle here now too. Let's go back, and I have to select everything, and it's going to say, when I click it, it's going to ask me, wrong tool, it's going to ask me if I want to, I'll get the right tool, add this to my selection area. So if I click this, you can see that I have these little interesting icons around. And so by clicking in another area, I'm gonna actually add the selected into part of this group. So now my circle has been merged with this other, and I can paint it. Let's go back and paint. So I have to sort of say, yep, you can be part of my group. You can merge with me in order for more things to be added. Now, if I wanted to release it, so in Illustrator we say we can release our effects. So if I click, I can release it or expand it. So up here at the top, I have an expand button right here. And by expanding it, now it again is grouped. Let's ungroup it. Usually when you expand, you can see how now all of my pieces, which actually creates some pretty cool art, are still independent. Now I still have this area that's grouped. It's kind of an embedded type of a deal, but eventually I can break it down enough to see how to break things apart. And now I've released that Live Paint group, so I can't, you know, unless I select everything and then merge it into a paint group and go back and color, I can't I can't go back. But really interesting effects, especially if you're doing things with sketches, that you can paint and color in areas that otherwise in the old days of Illustrator you weren't able to do. So there you go. There's the Live Paint Bucket, awesome tool, and then Image Trace. Again, fabulous options in Illustrator.